The last few episodes of The Boys managed to tick off not just the critics, they sent even the show's most ride-or-die fans into a full-on meltdown. And the finale didn't disappoint in some Game of Thrones kind of way. Oh no, the audience got straight up played by the showrunners, which, obviously, causing some serious burning in certain lower regions for everyone who spent a whole 7 years waiting and cooking up theories about how the goody-goody good guys would, once again, totally demolish the big bad evil villains. And now, I'm here to twist the knife even deeper, laughing as I say this, because this show was doomed to crash and burn from the very start. Even though, at first glance, it genuinely looked like an absolute masterpiece.
So good. Life is just a mundane. You don't wanna be alone on the food chain. Life is just a mukbang. Bang, bang, bang.
Let's rewind back to 2019, when nobody had ever heard the word pandemic, and the only reason you'd strap on a mask was for Comic-Con. Avengers Endgame had just had its big moment, and everyone was sitting around wondering how Marvel was supposed to function without its biggest stars. Spoiler, it couldn't. Like, at all. Anyway, it was still the era of comic book movies running Hollywood, but you could already feel it in the air. Mainstream audiences were slowly, quietly, starting to get sick of knowing exactly how everything would play out on screen. And then, like a bolt of lightning out of a clear blue sky, this bold, grown-up little show called The Boys showed up and took off fast. On paper, the concept seemed almost too simple. Take superheroes, put them in a dark light, or better yet, humanize them. But if you dig a little deeper, a massive chunk of that success came from one thing. The Boys was the perfect anti-Marvel. Eric Kripke kept saying the whole goal was to deconstruct comic book culture broadly, but what the show actually pulled off was something neither Zack Snyder nor Joss Whedon ever managed to do over at DC. While everyone else was busy Xeroxing the Marvel formula, Kripke genuinely built something fresh, something that didn't feel predictable or sickeningly wholesome for once.
Easy peasy, Japanesey.
And real credit where it's due here, because we could have easily ended up with just another Watchmen ripoff. But Kripke wasn't out here trying to play philosopher or shove some deep message down your throat. Instead, he basically sprinted into a room full of people still ugly crying over Tony Stark's death and started yelling, "Bro, that guy was obviously a PDF file. He 100% had his own private island with a Jarvis land on it." I genuinely think the whole project was conceived, at its core, as one big troll of the superhero hysteria that had completely taken over pop culture. So the writers kept packaging absolute, unhinged insanity inside the kind of familiar rapper audiences were already used to. Yeah, technically it's based on the comic of the same name, but anyone who's actually read it will tell you Kripke took basically nothing from it besides the core idea, probably because the comic reads less like source material and more like a fanfic written by a 14-year-old who got stuffed in a locker every day at school. Another huge factor in the show's success? Perfect timing. Like I said, even though Marvel was still at its peak, a lot of their solo films were already starting to sag. Iron Man 3 is the perfect example. Flagship title, beloved character, solid cast, and somehow the whole thing curdled into a total farce. It felt like everyone working on it was being forced to try to hype the audience up, but no matter what they did, it kept collapsing into some joke you felt like you'd already heard before. All of that piled up until superhero content basically became synonymous with predictability. Going to one of those movies was like a therapy session, completely safe. Bring the kids, bring your wife, bring your side piece. Enjoy the CGI slugfest, soak up the happy ending, go home, and spend the next 3 days arguing on Reddit about what actually happened in the comics. But the key thing? You knew it was gonna go exactly like that. Every single time. And the Boys caught those basement dweller geeks completely off guard. From literally the first few seconds, the show dunked you into this full-on emotional roller coaster without even properly explaining the world to you first. You could laugh, cry, gasp, and yeah, maybe tug your little situation a couple of times, and only 15 minutes of the episode had gone by.
Oi.
The cherry on top? An insanely charismatic anti-hero. And I want to be precise, not a villain, an anti-hero. Anthony Starr wasn't playing some run-of-the-mill sociopath who'd immediately roll over the second the good guys showed up. This was a seemingly cold, unreadable wall of a person, impossible to figure out, which again, looks simple on the surface. But the longer you watched, the more Homelander triggered this deep, creeping sense of dread, mixed, weirdly, with something almost like understanding. He was the living embodiment of a nuclear warhead, technically built for defense or offense, but also a completely unpredictable, merciless weapon that doesn't think twice, doesn't give second chances. It just obliterates. Put all of that together at exactly the right moment, and yeah, on the surface, it genuinely looked like a masterpiece. Here's the thing though, everything I just said, that only applies to the first season. A flash in the pan from 7 years ago that worked as a sharp, timely, countercultural jab at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the mass hysteria they'd manufactured. The comic book movie empire was already wobbling back then, and the boys needed to stay that mainstream punk band for the people who, actually got it, to prove it was the real deal. But unfortunately, the moment money started coming through the door, the big suits decided to go for the big leagues, chase the mainstream, and the show slowly started becoming the very thing it used to clown on.
It was said that you would destroy this Sith, not join them!
First, the spirit of it just disappeared. It felt like Kripke had set a certain tone for the show, and then handed it off, and now some other random guy or gal was sitting at his desk, picking up his beat-up notebook full of scribbled notes, and trying to write the next episode from scratch. Oh, people like the over-the-top violence? Better throw that in every 3 seconds. Oh, they like the crude humor? More of that then. And what you ended up with was this weirdly predictable slop with a thin, kinda sad excuse for a plot. The kind of thing you can't watch with your kids. Your wife won't get any of it, and honestly, if you've got a side piece, you could probably find something way more fun to watch together. Basically every Marvel movie after Phase 3. And on top of that, without even wrapping up the main storyline, they decided, for some reason, to start cranking out spin-offs that ultimately contribute absolutely nothing to the bigger picture and just make you sit in front of a screen for another hour of your life you're never getting back. Take any season of Gen V. You think it should be building toward the finale, dropping some key info, introducing important new characters, but what you actually get is the boys' cutting room floor scraps. And not the cool deleted scenes, no. The ones they were about to throw in the trash but instead duct taped into 2 whole seasons.
Dragons, cheesy as hell. But banging your sister on a dragon? Jackpot. You see, there's a twist.
The funniest part? Right around the time comic book movies started losing their grip on Hollywood, the boys decided to make a sharp pivot with their whole countercultural humor angle. Somewhere after season 2, the geniuses behind the show figured there was nothing better to mock than the real world. On one hand, honestly not a bad crisis move. It gave the writers more room to play and let the audience see something a little different. But on the other hand, the boys slowly stopped being an entertaining show and started feeling more like a news feed for kindergartners. A little politics here, a little culture war talking points there. Not like I'm trashing all of it. Some of it lands pretty well, genuinely funny at times. But the whole thing just kept sliding into lazy, half-baked territory. Eric Kripke recently said something about how the real world had gotten so absurd, there was nothing left to draw inspiration from. But honestly, I think everyone working on the show either just didn't want to put in the effort anymore, or they gave everything they had in season 1 and simply had no idea how to stick the landing. The real question, of course, is whether you could have seen it coming. That this seemingly genius idea would eventually collapse into some niche nonsense with a finale they had to trick people into watching with misleading posters. And my answer is, just look at who made it. Eric Kripke is genuinely talented in his own way, and I have massive respect for how he turned The Boys into an actual reality. But come on. Kripke is one of the guys behind the legendary Supernatural, a show with an equally compelling concept that got stretched out like a cheap condom purely for the sake of profit. The moment I saw this dude's name attached to The Boys as a creator, it was honestly pretty clear right then and there that one season was never gonna be the end of it. And honestly, we got lucky. We ended up with 5 seasons of 8 episodes each, but it could have been 10 seasons, 25 episodes a pop. God bless the environmentalists. I'm convinced that the only reason Eric eventually ran out of material is because they successfully fought against deforestation, and at some point, the man simply ran out of paper. Though let's be real, the last 2 seasons, he was clearly writing on toilet paper anyway. The second thing is this. Countercultural stuff almost never stays genuinely countercultural once it crosses over into mainstream territory. The Boys is the perfect case study. Instead of giving that nerdy little 30-year-old comic book fan an actually interesting story, The show chose the mass audience, complete with all its politics and agenda of the week content. Hey, if you made it all the way to this point, I genuinely hope life treats you well, bestie. Drop a comment and let me know what hit you the hardest about The Boys finale. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.